Professor Saha, would you agree with this, that this is a deal that's happening? As many see, there were countries that literally did a sajda to the US. They kowtowed before President Trump. The moment he made an announcement, you had heads of state and governments rushing to Washington, D.C. and picking up the phone and dialing him, seeking his favor. India did not do that. India continued to negotiate for what was described as not just a win-win, but a deal that would be fair and equitable for both partners. Do you see this deal as that India is not a subordinate partner to the US?
Absolutely, because this ambiguity continued for some time, but India did hold on to its strategic patience, as I would say, and India has been an outlier, and India's leadership in the last couple of years at all global platforms has been quite remarkable, because India could show the courage to present its views in a coherent manner, and definitely drawing on the experience that we had with different countries. India believes in multi-alignment, but at the same time, India is very keen to strengthen the partnership with our key partners and the larger economies, because that is in the country's interest in the long run as we develop our roadmap towards Viksit Bharat. And US absolutely is an indispensable partner when we connect on some of the areas of trade and economics, because it is linked to the manufacturing sector. We have the service sector connect
Rahul
with US
Ahluwalia
and
wants
others.
to come in, as does Mr. Badri Narayan. Rahul, just give me 30 seconds before I just get Mr. Badri Narayan on the legal aspect of a trade deal. As Rahul Ahluwalia pointed out, Mr. Badri Narayan, America says something today, may just do something very different like it did with South Korea, saying that, okay, you're not ratifying it, another 10% tariffs come your way. Do we see a situation like that between India and America? Or you think in the past 1 year, the relationship has traveled some distance and perhaps is likely to be more mature?
I think you can't compare India with Korea or any other individual countries in the ASEAN. I think we have got one advantage of having a very strong EU and EFTA deal. So that's something which is behind us. So US knows that EU and India can get closer. We have 32 countries in the EU which are now part of that deal. I don't expect there to be any major issue. The only area where there can be an issue is the use and purchase of Russian oil. One last thing is that I think we still need to see the details of the trade deal. These trade deals are no longer simple, five-pager trade deal that we used to do on what is the custom tariff rates for different line items. These are complex trade deals. We will have access to market not just in terms of goods, but in terms of services, H-1B visas, access to IT services, pharmaceutical services, healthcare services, medical tourism. I think there is a whole host of complexities which are there, which probably will need to get ironed out. So those are the areas where if something goes amiss, there could be some delays. EU deal also will take longer to ratify because it needs to go to the European Union Parliament. There needs to be finishing of all of the areas. While Donald Trump typically has managed these tariffs through executive action. And that's something which is pending in the US Supreme Court, whether he has the power to do so. But as of now, we think that US is probably likely to bring down these rates much earlier. And we will still negotiate with the US delegations on the details with respect to what it is going to be. And I still feel that there will be still a large number of items that we will need to close out with them. But I don't think they'll be in a position to, for want of a better word, bully us into agreeing to their terms merely because they can increase or reduce, considering we've got many more friends today than we probably had a year ago.
Multilateralism is something that India continued to insist on, as did the European Union. Rahul, you wanted to come in on the aspect whether India can get bullied or not. And overall, the impression is India stood firm. India also did not go for the surround sound of India being called a dead economy or fueling the Russian war, even though that's not true. But India focused on the deal. You wanted to come in on this, Rahul?
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. I think this aspect of India being focused on its strategic interest, which is the deal, is because I think we should reject this framing that Donald Trump has adopted, that trade is win-lose, right? That I will win the deal and you will lose the deal, right? if we get access to the US market and the US gets access to India's market, there is no win-loss going on here. Every Indian consumer retains the choice to buy an American product or not to buy an American product, right? They can refuse. Even if dairy gets access to the Indian market, Indian consumers can just say, I will not buy American dairy, right? So it is not that India has lost, even if we give access to the Indian dairy.
Though politically,
What
that
does
could be a
happen?
hot potato for the Prime
Exactly,
Minister
exactly,
and the government.
exactly, because producers can lose, right? Dairy producers in India can stand to lose. So politically, we should be very careful about protecting certain producers by giving them some benefits that where they stand to lose. That's what we have to be careful about. Domestic special interests that stand to lose from the trade deal. India as a whole stands to gain.
That's a very big point you're making. India as a whole stands to gain. There are sectors that may have to be protected or may have to get special protection: agriculture, dairy. Even in dairy and agriculture, there are some segments that are being talked about, and we'll talk about it in greater detail. Something that's not manufactured in India, something that's really niche. Can that come in? Is that a softener? It also depends how, and that is why this NDA parliamentary meet becomes very crucial, because it's also how that message goes across to the rest of the country, Badri Narayan, that becomes extremely, extremely crucial. Whether there are certain products, we were told about cranberries or certain other things that are not even made, that are not even produced in India. If that comes in, or some blue cheese or high-end cheese, if that comes into India, does that impact the Indian producers? But before I come to that, I want to take our viewers through some of the surround sound that followed in the that was there in the past 7 to 8 months. Remember, President Trump at one point of time called India a dead economy. What's President Trump saying now? India to buy $500 billion worth of American goods. Now, is India to buy $500 billion worth of American goods, or is that wordplay? Because the compact in 2025, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went to the United States and there was an agreement between the two, it was to double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. Though we've lost out a year, it's already 2026, and that was a framework that was decided on in 2025. Then Donald Trump earlier, he had said, I don't care what India does. What's he saying now? That both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and I, we get things done. He's talked about though he's always talked about his very close, association and respect for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What did he say earlier? He said, have very little business with India. What's he saying now? That relationship with India is stronger now than before. He said Indian economy is dead. Clearly, he's not saying that anymore. Or, whether it's Howard Lutnick or Scott Bessent saying that India is fueling the war in Russia by buying Russian oil, or Europe is fueling that war by buying that same refined oil from India. So, Professor Saha, all that surround sound is now history, or do we see it can still come back some way or the other? And that is why India will have to ignore the surround sound and only look at the deal, as Rahul Aluwali and actually all three of you are putting it. The deal is in India's favor.
Yeah, I mean, India has demonstrated under the leadership of Prime Minister a very matured foreign policy position, and as I mentioned, strategic patience despite several provocations at multiple points in time. So once we look at the long-term interest of the country and frame our narrative accordingly, it helps us also steer our own narrative and the way we want to approach foreign policy and response to some of the global events that are unfolding at this point. And this trade deal is connected to our economic growth, it connected to our economic opportunities, and the roadmap that we lies in front of us. So foreign policy and economics getting connected very, very strongly at this point, and the trade deal is the outcome.
So how much of it, Badri Narayan, in your view, is just buy and sell, and how much of this would encourage Atmanirbhar Bharat, manufacture in India, make in India, and when it comes to high-end technology that India quite urgently requires?
Yeah. So I think Gaurav, I think these are all very, very good points. I just wanted to say a few things. One, I think we should agree and we should appreciate the fact that India is a 4 trillion economy today and will
Yes.
probably reach over the next 5 years at between 8 and 10 trillion economy. And that is something which I think US recognizes and everybody else in the world recognizes. The EU deal took 20 years. Why did it happen suddenly? It's because India's emergence as a stable economic power with a very strong local consumption. So US is looking that is it possible when it goes from 4 trillion to 10 trillion, when my per capita income crosses some magic figure such as $3,000, $5,000, which changes the way a consumer consumes products. You said the blue cheese and cranberries. Indians will start consuming some of these items as we kind of go up the value chain, and US understands that. So I think these are all very good places for us to be in. It also understands that Indian consumers, as they consume more, and it's got a big country, a uniform market, with all the issues with GST, it still makes it one market. Our income tax rates have come down. We are encouraging year on year cleanup, and there's a lot more automation going through the entire system. So what I feel is that investors or long-term viewers, economists, capitalists, and people who are looking at India are looking at it in a very, very big way. And therefore, I feel if we get the policies right and the government keeps making changes and improvements, if you're able to attract manufacturing to India, even a portion of it, if you're able to build high-end products, for example, we are investing in things like semiconductors, we're
Yes.
investing in like chip designing, data centers, we are investing in textile upgradation. So all of these, I think, are going to have an impact. And when you set the stage, then you will have companies from the US, from Europe, from Japan come in and invest. And in the long run, we will get the benefit of that. So this is why I think that this trade deal is important. It's come at a very opportune time. President Trump is seeing that India will move from 4 trillion to 10 trillion. It's not a dead economy by any means. Those are all word plays. But today, if he is able to get access to Indian market, both for Venezuelan oil as also his high tech, and if Indian economy keeps growing and the consumption is a strong story, I think there's a win-win for both of us, like what Rahul and Professor has been saying.
You know,
That I
it's
think
very
we
actually
are in a
very
good place.
heartening to hear. And Rahul, we are not letting Russia down and going in for Venezuelan oil, because if we were to rewind pre 2022, we were anyway not buying much Russian oil. We just took best advantage of the situation. Now are we trying to take advantage of the other best situation? Does that impact our relationship with Russia adversely in any way?
I don't think it should, frankly. And I mean, because Russia is not exactly got a lot of friends on the global stage. So, to the extent that we remain relatively friendly to them, they should be fine. If we don't buy Russian oil, does not suddenly turn us into an enemy because it's not in our interest, right? Every country has to look out for its interest. I'll just give a slightly different perspective on manufacturing in India and why
Sure.
people want to invest in manufacturing in India. I think as large as the Indian market is relative to the global market is still very small. I think if we look at our recent manufacturing success, the biggest manufacturing success in India is Apple iPhones, right? We are now making anywhere between 20 to 30% of the world's iPhones, but less than 2% of iPhone global revenue happens from India. So let's be very clear about it. Apple is not making iPhones in India because India has a large market. Apple is making iPhones in India because it wants to sell to the world from India. So we should be very clear that any company will invest in a very big way in India only if it can service the world from India. And because the world market is several orders of magnitude bigger than the Indian market, the OECD countries, EU plus the US, have an approximately $60 trillion market. Our market is $4 trillion, right? So
And that is what we should focus on.
that's
The
what we should
$60
focus on.
trillion market.
Yeah.
And manufacture in India, high-end
For the
technology.
world.
That is why it is so crucial. We have age on our side. Age profile is on our side. Language, technology, science, everything works for us. Of
Absolutely.
course, if we all work together as one country, keeping, as my show says, India first. I want to thank all my guests on this part of the debate. Such a privilege to talk to all of you and learn so much from you on this. But do also keep in mind, it was in February 2025. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had said that the United States and India together had set a target of doubling their bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. India was amongst first of the bloc for a trade deal with the US, and we had hoped that India-US trade deal happens first and then India-EU will follow. But then look at history. It just happened the other way around. India-EU happened first, and then India-US is likely to happen. The two nations said they would work together on very critical aspects: high-end technology, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, focus on establishing strong supply chains, and also strategic minerals. Look at the foresight. Listen in to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
आज हमने द्विपक्षीय व्यापार को 2030 तक 2 गुना से भी अधिक बढ़ाकर $500 बिलियन तक पहुंचाने का लक्ष्य निर्धारित किया है। हमारी टीमें एक पारस्परिक लाभकारी ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट को शीघ्र संपन्न करने पर काम करेगी। भारत की ऊर्जा सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करने में हम ऑयल तथा गैस ट्रेड को बल देंगे। ऊर्जा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में निवेश भी बढ़ेगा। न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी क्षेत्र में हमने
It's a big statement by a key aide of US President Donald Trump on access to Indian agricultural market. US Agriculture Secretary has said there would be more American agricultural products in Indian markets soon. Trump aide has gone on to say that India trade deal is a US first victory. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has always been talking about India first. President Trump has been talking about America first. MAGA and MEGA is something both of them were talking about. But is America getting access to India's agriculture sector, and how? Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had been very clear. Interests of Indian farmers and Indian dairy will be protected. US Agriculture Secretary has taken to social media platform to post this message. Thank you, President of the United States, once again for delivering for our American farmers. New US-India deal will export more American farm products to India's massive market, lifting prices and pumping cash into rural America. In 2024, America's agricultural trade deficit with India was at $1.3 billion. India's growing population is an important market for American agricultural products, and today's deal will go a long way to reducing this deficit. America first victory on top of a dozen of deals. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had insisted, and he's always insisted, that the interests of Indian farmers, Indian dairy would be protected. He told the American and the world community rather bluntly, India will never compromise on national interest.
हमारे लिए अपने किसानों का हित सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता है। भारत अपने किसानों के, पशुपालकों के और मछुआरे भाई बहनों के हितों के साथ कभी भी समझौता नहीं करेगा। और मैं जानता हूं व्यक्तिगत रूप से मुझे बहुत बड़ी कीमत चुकानी पड़ेगी, लेकिन मैं इसके लिए तैयार हूं। मेरे देश के किसानों के लिए, मेरे देश के मछुआरों के लिए, मेरे देश के पशुपालकों के लिए आज भारत तैयार है।
So I want to bring Professor Dipanshu Mohan, Professor and Dean at Jindal Global University, joining us on this broadcast into this conversation. Professor, how would you read Secretary Brooke Rolands' message that has just been put out on social media platform X that says, thank you, President of the United States, for delivering for our American farmers. The new US-India deal will export more American farm products to India's massive market, lifting prices and pumping cash into rural America.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I mean, this was my apprehension and concern. In fact, before coming to the show, this is one of the points that I wanted to flag, that we should be very careful in celebrating any victory, so as to speak. And Donald Trump has bullied his way in to making India submit towards what would be a terms of trade for deal that is clearly in America's interest. I don't see an enormous benefit for India in the medium or short or medium term. I mean, over the long term, we don't really know how these deals play out. So there has to be a lot of evidence-based analysis. But my concern is connected to what the US Secretary for Agriculture is saying, which is India will now, given it's bringing down its tariff rate to almost 0% on $500 billion worth of American goods in energy, agriculture, coal, you will find the domestic industrial capacity to be affected, if not in a major way, but at least in a significant way, particularly businesses.
Also joining us is Dr. Kavar Millon Singh, again Associate Professor Economics at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management. Professor, your reading of what the US Agriculture Secretary is just putting out on social media platform X, saying that the new deal will export more American farm products to India's massive market, lifting prices, pumping cash into rural America. In 2024, America's agricultural trade deficit with India was $1.3 billion. India's growing population is an important market for American agricultural products, and today's deal will go a long way in reducing this deficit.
Good morning, Gaurav, and good morning, Professor. My reading, as far as this particular news which is coming just now, that it has been long expected that there could be a possible deal between India and US as far as the trade deal is concerned. But again, as I look at it, that US is getting a large, Indian market, and as far as the agri product is concerned, that has been the concern in India, that how it is going to affect the domestic, agri processing industries and so on. But again, as I look at it, India recently has a deal with EU and now having a deal with the US. So moving forward, I see that there is a market for Indian goods in US as well, because most of the time the trade is again on the reciprocal basis. So I don't think it's a kind of a one-way deal. Moving forward, we also have a large US market to look at.
We certainly do, but the commitment to protect India's agriculture and dairy sector, has there been a compromise in that, in your view? Of course, very sketchy details and very one-sided information so far. We are hearing from President Trump. We are yet to hear in detail from Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, or perhaps they will inform the Parliament first. But your reading, given the current situation, would Indian agriculture sector be adversely impacted?
Yeah. As I look at probably in the short term, I see that it is going to be impacted. But again, moving forward, it is also make the agri industry more competitive as well. So I look at in the longer term how it is flagging out, that we need to see. Because as of now, it is some minor detail is coming out, so we can't really make a decision based on just what is coming out.
Okay, because we do not know the products that will come in. Even in agriculture sector, when negotiations were on, Professor Mohan, we were told that there are certain things like cranberries which are not really mass produced in India. If they were to come in, or in EU's context, we were told that only when negotiations were on. So again, ultimately, that legal scrubbing of the final document, and we still do not know what's finally permitted and what's not. If some high-end blue cheese that's not made in India, if in large quantity, if that were came in, some niche products came in, it wouldn't impact the mass market. Your reading of that that thought process?
No, I would just say that if American corn, American meat, and what you would consider as American dairy, if these three even are able to come into the Indian market at the tariff rate which is spoken of, that is 0%, this will decimate India's meat, at least agricultural sector, in a huge and
But is
enormous
there
way.
any
I
word
would be
that
very
American meat
no, no,
is
no. But
coming in, or
allow me
that's
to
your
finish.
assumption?
Allow me to finish. Allow me to finish. You know, I think you've called me on the show. You should allow me to
No,
finish.
only to understand based on facts so far. Is there
Yes,
any
so I
word
will
that
give you the
American meat
facts.
has
The
been permitted, or
vulnerability.
is corn being permitted for human consumption or for fuel? Again, I'm only going on the basis of arguments that were made when the deal was being negotiated.
Well, if we are going on the basis of arguments, you need to hear both sides of the story. All right. And if you called me on the panel, allow me to finish. So, point number
Sure.
one. Point number one: agriculture, energy, coal, even steel for that matter, if these sectors are allowed to be opened up to the American economy at a 0% tariff rate, be aware that India's domestic industrial capacity cannot hold that level of capacity and competition. We should be very honest. The deals with the EU and what we are negotiating with the US is being carefully discussed right now. The effects of this on our economy will take a substantive period of time. Deals don't work, or effects of these don't work in the immediate sense. It takes at least, and I'm not very clear why we had to really rush our way into a deal with the US, because if you look at the facts, not arguments, facts, India's exports in December jumped 20% despite Trump's tariff war. In fact, despite a 50% tariff that was coming on India, India's exports to the US have actually gone higher. The data shows you that 1/5 in November. We have been doing trade with the US, mostly in services, which have been increasing. Its exports on goods have been at 38.13 billion. So the economy which was struggling with the tariffs was not the Indian economy at large, it was the US economy. I can think of two labor intensive sectors which had a huge impact. One is textiles, which dipped roughly around 22.4%, and gems and jewelry around 39.4%. But telecom instruments, smartphones, exports in that surged by 216.9% despite American tariffs. So I think the Minister of Commerce, Piyush Goyal, leading with the trade delegation, was trying to hash out a carefully negotiated deal. We should look at it in fine print. I am
Sure.
very skeptical about this call which has happened between two leaders, because what it may do is push back against the carefully traded negotiating deal that had
Again, is
already
that an
happened.
assumption that it may
No,
push
no, no, it's
back?
not
No,
an
skepticism
assumption.
is welcome.
No, no,
Skepticism
no,
is
it's not an
welcome, but my
assumption. I'm
point
just
is
telling you
skepticism that's
facts.
based on facts. In terms of, when you
See,
mention meats, is there any evidence to suggest that there's a give on American meat? Because once that fine print is there, I will come back to you for more on that. I've just been told, I've been hearing of corn and cranberries and stuff like that. But let me bring in Pranay Upadhyay, who's been in touch with sources both in the Ministry of Commerce and in the Ministry of External Affairs. Pranay, what are you picking up from what the US Agriculture Secretary has just put out, greater access for American agricultural products in Indian markets?
That remain to be clarified by either side, Gaurav, because we are asking these questions from both sides, the US side as well as the Indian side, and officials are yet to come up with a greater clarification on this thing. You rightly pointed out that if it is all about the pistachios, if it is all about the California apple or California, almonds or blueberries, we don't have a problem. But if it is about the GM, crops, if this is all about soybean, this is all about, the other agricultural products, then definitely we have our own our reservations, and those were our red lines. This is if it
Yes.
is all about dairy products. So we have to see, because currently we have, how are we going to justify, how are we going to balance the 0% versus 11%? Currently we have US products at 11%. So we are not going to reduce all the trade barriers unless we conclude a full-fledged FTA, and this is not an FTA. We are yet to get, and currently we are only looking at a modified notification by the US side, clearly, indicating that the 25% penal tariffs have been removed, the 25% have been the tariff duties have been reduced to 18%. So that notification is also yet to come, and therefore we need greater clarity on these issues. And as our experts were also pointing it out, that we have to think in terms of protecting our market interests. It is only it's not, things are not decided by headlines and deadlines. So and for President Donald Trump, it's mostly things are about headlines, and we have to see that how things are actually ironed
Good
out.
point. Okay, Professor Mohan wants to come in. And Professor Mohan, that's the point I want to refer to, because, we've been tracking this for quite some time and we haven't seen India come under pressure unless you have evidence to the contrary that India came under pressure and started, acting under American pressure. If you know that, do enlighten us. But from all accounts that we've heard, whether from the Commerce Secretary or officials in the Commerce Ministry or from Union Minister Piyush Goyal, they've been following a line and length to ensure that Indian farmers, Indian dairy, that's protected. And that is why we are also waiting for clarity on what is it that the Americans are getting access to, sir.
See, if you're waiting for clarity, then let's wait for clarity and then discuss. But at the same time, what I want to say is the call made between two head of states may push back, I'm using the word may, push back a carefully negotiated. India was actually not in a rush to get into a deal with the US, which was, I feel, in the interests of both countries, and particularly for India, because it had drawn these red lines we are speaking about. But why did this sentence, you asked me a question around the Secretary of Agriculture announcing that this is great for American action. That's worrying, because clearly there is something that has happened which we don't know of. It may push back, and I think we have to be very careful. I hope, and I really hope, people in stocking in the government are aware that we should not carefully submit or in any way give away our leverage in sectors which we have very limited competitive advantage. Agriculture is not a sector we have any significant competitive advantage. People may talk about it, but I have worked in agricultural sector looking at conditions of farmers. I can tell you we're not in a state of any competition. Having said that, it was very important that India signs a deal with the US for one simple reason, which is not on the good side, but on the capital investment side. The RBI data reveals that net foreign direct investment has in India collapsed by 96.5% in FY25. It has just come down to $353 million, which means that there was a dollar drought or a condition where Indian rupee was suffering, and we were already seeing the evidence of this. So it needed to be the case that India needs to get into some kind of conversations where American investment into India does not.
And this is where the give and take happens, Professor, as you well know, since you worked in the agriculture sector. So you well know there has to be a give and take. But what is it that you're giving and what is it that you're taking?
Exactly.
Is the
I think that's the point
And I want to bring in Dr. Millon Singh once again into this conversation, because Dr. Singh, fear-mongering gets us nowhere. At the same time, skepticism is well and truly welcome to know what's happening. But is there any indication so far that India has acted under any kind of pressure? The fact that America called us a dead economy, we waited. The fact that America said we are buying Russian oil and we are fueling the war, we kept quiet. India is moving in one direction towards a deal. But this statement made by the US Agriculture Secretary, is that a cause for concern? Or there are areas where there is no competition, that entry can be given depending on what counter entry do we have in the American market?
Gaurav, as I see it, though on the face of it, it's look like that India agree and dairy industry is going to be impacted. But once these kind of trade deals have happened, so you see the negotiation goes, not in months, in years and years, as we have seen in case of India-EU Pact as well. So obviously, all these things which is we are wary about at this point of time have been discussed in details. So as more details will come out, probably we'll be in a position to make a decision. But again, you see, US has been India's trading partner. It is nothing new to it. India and EU has been India's partner for very long time. And once we have you see trade deal with EU and US moving forward, not only we see that the Indian industry getting impacted maybe in the short term, but as I look at as I was earlier said also, that we have to see that we have been discussing these on different tariff lines. So you see, for example, in case of EU, almost 9,000 tariff lines have been discussed separately, and probably in these cases also we have to see that what specific discussion have already had on different tariff lines, and obviously we are not looking in terms of zero tariff right now, but over a period of time, obviously the tariffs are going to be
Yes.
reduced, and we see that how industries are getting impacted. And keeping in
Pranay,
mind that
yes.
we have also in recent budget have taken decision how the small and medium industries can be made competitive. So I see that there is a ray of hope as well.
You're looking at a ray of hope, and where there is no competition, Pranay, conversations, around, let's say it's the California apples or pistachio or blueberries or cranberries. Is that an area where entry can be given, or is that also an area which will lead to a huge political furor in India?
That remain a cause of concern for India, and that's why we have given certain list to United States and US trade representative, that these are the areas where India does not have the capacity or the kind of products in our agriculture line of produce. But as far as the soybean is concerned, as far as the certain other producers are concerned, where the major number of livelihoods are dependent on that, be it the maritime product, the shrimp production and all, because we have our capacity. And not only that, we have our life, many people are dependent on for their livelihood on these products. So that remained a red line for India. Dairy constitutes almost 16% in the farm income, and therefore we cannot play with that, and we have safeguarded that in our previous FTAs, be it our FTA with Australia, be it our FTA with New Zealand, be it our FTA with UK and European Union. So that remained a red line. But yeah, I think there is some concession as well. There are certain things which can be worked out, because trade deal is all about give and take, and you have to maneuver, you have to find space to accommodate, because there is no denial about the fact, Gaurav, that there is a trade imbalance, because we also go to China with the same complaints. There is a huge trade
Absolutely.
imbalance of India, a bilateral trade imbalance between India and China. So therefore, there is a recognition of the fact that there is a trade imbalance. We want to accommodate the American produce and American products, but on which sectors, and that need to be accommodated, and that need to be worked out, and therefore these
Keep tracking
negotiation
that story.
negotiation
I
took,
will.
yeah.
I want to thank all my guests, and Pranay, keep tracking that story.